We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Friday edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix. It is the 19th of April, an infamous day in history, and today will no doubt join the ranks of yet another explosive moment in the American landscape and memory. You'd have to be living under a rock right now to have not heard or experienced via TV, mass media, social media, or otherwise, to be aware of what's happening currently in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, this started on Monday, on the 15th, which was Tax Day, also known as Patriot Day in Boston, where 2, possibly 3 explosions, maybe 4, went off at the Boston Marathon. And over the course of the next few days, or the days that followed, there were literally hundreds of pictures that were circulating across the internet, many of them with people that were wearing backpacks, large backpacks, and then no longer wearing the backpacks. Some of the people wearing the backpacks had a few things in common. Namely, the backpacks themselves, they looked alike, but also they were wearing similar pants, which seemed like some form of military issue style khaki and what we would call desert boots. Black jacket, black backpack, khakis, desert boots. Now, as those pictures began to circulate, there were people who were wearing the same attire, but they were also wearing baseball caps. And on those baseball caps was a symbol that appeared to look like the same symbol for the security company known as The Craft, which was started by the late Chris Kyle, who was known as America's most decorated sniper and one of the most deadly humans on the planet for his ability to remove people from a distance. So Kyle started his own version of Blackwater, a security training company. Kyle was a Navy SEAL. And immediately people began to make connections between The Craft, these guys at the marathon, all their pictures, and what their presence could mean. I was talking with Ian Crane a little bit this morning, And he seems to think that they're really at the heart of this. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And here's my reason why. Now, that's not to say that there aren't connections that are related to the craft. I believe that the head of Homeland Security in Boston, let me see if I can find what Ian had to say about him. Just go in here. It's going to take me just a moment. But I believe the head of Homeland Security in Boston has some connection with the craft. But for me personally, I think that it's far, far, far too sloppy for the craft to be wearing their insignias during an event like this. I mean, it would be really dumb. And I actually posed that question to some people, and people that were posting photos of the guys in the caps. It's like, why would they do it? Why would they do it? And the common answer was to, rub it in our faces. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that first of all, if you go to the craft website, they actually sell the caps right there online. Of course, there's some great Illuminati symbolism. You've got the bullseye in one eye of the skull. So you have the single eye, the single vision. And it's the patch that's on the right eye, and the patch on the right eye versus the left eye essentially means a different level of initiation. So you've got all this juicy Illuminati symbolism with the symbol, but were they really members of the craft team? I'm not sure, because it feels to me that if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to throw people off, if you wanted to get them to look in a different direction, you'd have them put those hats on, and then move them around and make them quite conspicuous and have lots of photos. So for me, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to look at, but I'm not sold on their involvement. And that's just one layer, okay? But those were the first sets of images that we saw, besides the images of people that were being moved out of that area, people that were hurt, injured, wounded, and even those were quite dubious. And we're in a really, really strange place, because we have this knee-jerk reaction now, and I think part of it has been cultivated for us to look at, say, what happened in Tucson with Gabrielle Giffords, and what happened in Colorado with Aurora, and then what happened in Sandy Hook. And there have been a lot of people doing a lot of work in these areas, and some of it incredibly powerful forensics that shows that things aren't what they seem in those areas, and those events weren't what they seem. So what happens now is we begin to look at, well, who's there and why? Why did these things occur? I'm sure a lot of you are well aware of Ed Chiarini's work, Dallas Goldbug, a.k.a. Well Aware One, and his whole actors theory. And like I said, I've said this many times before, I think the stuff that Ed did on Tucson and what he did on Columbine and what he did to a certain extent on Aurora was brilliant, because he showed very clearly that there were multiple people playing multiple roles in those events. Okay, I totally buy in at that level with Ed's work. I don't buy in completely to his unified theory of everything around these families and people playing different roles at different times. There may be some of that, but I don't think it's necessarily that complex. I think all you have to do is employ actors. Of course, in Sandy Hook, they had the crisis actors who were part of it. And if you look at what took place in Boston and in Waco, just outside of Waco, West Texas, there are two common denominators to both events. There were drills happening simultaneously. There was a disaster drill in West. The name of the town is West. It's not West Texas. It's actually in Central Texas. But there was a disaster drill that day. There was a drill in Boston that day of the marathon. There were bomb-sniffing dogs walking all over the place. There were people who were told to be calm prior to the bomb going off. That is testimony. That is initial testimony. And when, I believe it's Ed Davis, who, by the way, Ed Chiarini thinks is John Candy. If you look at them, they actually kind of look alike. In fact, when I saw the police chief of Boston, I thought, hey, that kind of looks like John Candy, to be honest with you. And I did. I swear to God, I did. So anyway, during that press conference, there was a reporter that kept trying to ask the question about people being told to stay calm before the bomb went off. And as soon as he would ask the question, somebody else would interrupt and throw another question in. He tried this, I think, 3 times, and all 3 times the question was avoided. Now, then you have the Saudi national who was arrested and then apparently deported. We don't know what happened to him. In the meantime, while I was on Facebook, I have people, talking about racism, that America is such a racist place. That we would assume that this Saudi national was the one that did something. Or we would assume that this young boy who was 19 years old who was accused of something. Now he's scarred, and there's great. You just happen to be of a different race, a different color, a different religion, and boy, you're a target. And there was plenty of that on Facebook. I saw a lot, so I interacted with some of it. So we had that. There's all these scenarios that have all unfolded in the past 4 days, including the scenario where we have drills taking place simultaneously. There was a drill happening during Sandy Hook. There was a drill happening during 7/7. Are you seeing a pattern here? So the pattern is, if there's a drill coming to your town, go in the other direction. That's really the pattern. Anyway, there are these drills taking place. And we're going to get into the astrological symbolism of this, because Gemini plays a really big role. Why? Because, well, you're going to see, it's very, very interesting here, okay? At the beginning of the week, one of the first things that I put up, this was before the Boston Marathon. The first thing I put up was a poster image of Matt Damon for the new film. It's going to come out in August, called Elysium, and it's from the director. It is from the director of District 9. Now, the theme of Elysium is that Matt Damon essentially plays a freedom fighter. Well, a freedom fighter is, one person's version of a freedom fighter is another person's version of a terrorist. So the whole idea behind Elysium is that it's in the future, and there are 2 classes of people. One class doesn't even live on Earth anymore. One class lives on a planet called Elysium, and it's paradise. I mean, from the trailer, I don't want to live there. And what they found out in Elysium is that they figured out how to kill all diseases. So you could live to be 150, 200 years old and look really, really good while you're doing it. You could live long and stay sexy. So they've got this incredible world that they're living on, And then back on Earth, Earth is a shithole, and people are trying to figure out how they can liberate themselves from their hell, their suffering, their misery. Well, it's the 99% versus the 1%, and a small group of freedom fighters, according to the people on Earth, terrorists, according to the people on Elysium, are going to invade Elysium and bring the system down. And if you look at the poster with Matt Damon, he has a piece of hardware attached to his back. It's like an exoskeleton. And then out of that exoskeleton, he's got looks like a monitor implanted in the back of his brain, or not a monitor, some kind of LED screen that he can program. So Matt Damon becomes this sort of transhumanist super soldier that's going to take on a super elite and bring Elysium to its knees. Elysium, by the way, is run by Jodie Foster, who, according to Ed Chiarini's cosmology, is actually, what's her name? The Prime Minister of Australia, Julia the Satanist, who I forget her last name. I'm sorry, I only got 2 hours sleep last night. This is what I do for you people. I stayed up all night, stayed up till 4 a.m, watching what was going down. Why? Because I couldn't sleep. I went to bed. I could not sleep. I was wired, tighter than a drum last night. And I got a text from my buddy Marv. He said, "You got to turn on CNN. Shit is going down in Boston." So I turned on CNN, and it did go down. And we're going to talk about what I saw, because it's important. Very important in terms of details. Okay? But anyway, getting back to this film with Julia Gillard, that's who Jodie Foster is apparently supposed to be.
New message from 46767. New message from Ken.
So sorry. That's why does it do that? Why do people call me during my show? I don't understand it. When the new studio and the new Free Association Radio rolls out, that will not happen, I promise you. Anyway, so Matt Damon goes to Elysium to take it down. He's transhumanist. We've already figured that out. Transhumanist super soldier. Well, where is Matt Damon from? Matt Damon is from Boston. He's from Boston, okay? Now, you may say, oh, it's just a coincidence. If you go back into the films of Matt Damon, and I've done plenty of what I call the Cinematrix, I've done plenty of decoding of Matt Damon and the roles he plays. And trust me, he plays some very interesting roles. I've gone over them before, but just in case you want me to refresh your memory, he plays the savant of Good Will Hunting. Interesting title, Good Will Hunting. They're taking place in Watertown. In Watertown, that's where it all takes place, right there, and of course near Harvard. So he plays Good Will Hunting with his buddy Ben Affleck. The two of them play. They're okay. Think about Affleck, and Damon, two, right? And he also played a multiple personality disordered assassin in The Bourne Supremacy. He played the angel. He played the devil. He and Matt Damon played. He and Ben Affleck played fallen angels in a Kevin Smith movie. So he's played the devil, or the assassinating arm of the devil. He's also played in the Amazing Mr. Ripley with Jude Cole, where he plays again a multiple personality sociopath con artist. He is also in The Brothers Grimm, which features again a duo, this time with Heath Ledger, who's no longer alive. He was also in the movie called The Good Shepherd, which I highly urge everyone to see, where he plays a graduate of Yale in Skull and Bones, and he becomes one of the first members of the CIA. I highly urge everybody to watch that movie, directed by Robert De Niro. So he's got a history of these roles. Now, of course, he was just a hero fracker, anti-fracker. Got to balance these things out a little bit. But what's really fascinating is that one of the suspects, the younger of the two, and I keep having to remind myself, I'm sorry, I'm only going on a few hours of sleep here. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and this came from Darren Williams today to me. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev went to the same prep school as Matt Damon in Boston. Same prep school. In fact, Ben Affleck. Same prep school. Now, if you look at, again, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with two brothers, right? Dzhokhar and his brother Tamerlan. And these guys they're Chechnyan nationals, supposedly. So again, we have two. Where are we? We're in Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini, detriment, bang. Okay. When we looked at, or when I looked at the chart on Wednesday for the Boston Marathon, the midheaven was at 0 degrees Jupiter. I'm sorry, 0 degrees Gemini midheaven, and then of course Jupiter and the Moon were also in Gemini at that time. So this is pretty significant. Now we're dealing with brothers, and one brother was wearing a black hat, and one brother was wearing a white hat. So now we have this mirror image, right? Black and white in duality. Well, there's another layer, because last night or early yesterday morning, as I'm watching CNN, I was banging around on Facebook with Tom Ford, and Tom is telling me, hey, Business Insider, which is a fairly reputable magazine/website, they released the names of the suspects. Well, guess what? The names of the suspects weren't the Tsarnaev brothers. No, they weren't. So this is from 21st Century Wire. Pete Santilli. People love Pete Santilli. I have seen a lot of his stuff that he does. He's got a radio show. I would say this about Pete Santilli: he's got balls. I don't know much more about him. My friend Remick thinks he's great. The guy's he has some sack. But I'm going to read you this story because it's important. This comes in at 3:30 a.m. PST 33, right? Okay, PST. 21st Century Wire. This gives you the whole background on the name thing, because the names that were given to me through Tom via the Business Insider were Sunil Tripathi and Mike Mulugeta. Okay, and so we're going to explore this here. So let me read this to you. 21st Century Wire reporters been online live, contributing to a special overnight broadcast of the Pete Santilli Show. Listen live now, tracking the story of the Boston bomber shootouts. The FBI released photos of these two suspects in the afternoon on April 18th, 2013. Now, these are supposed to be of Tamerlan and Dzhokhar. So the suspect in the white hat was originally meant to be that of Sunil Tripathi, but this was soon changed. But according to Sunil's family, as confirmed by the Pete Santilli Show live on air, the FBI picture above is not that of Sunil Tripathi. Below is a Facebook picture of Sunil. Also, here is the suspect still image that was said to be matched to Sunil's likeness. However, Boston police shootout today in Watertown, Massachusetts shows a major contradiction between what was announced on Boston police scanners late on April 18th and what is being released to the national media via AP from the other FBI press office. So what we know so far, two names were announced as suspects who police were in pursuit of, and their names were Mike Mulugeta, who was reported as shot dead, and missing student Sunil Tripathi, and were reported to be at large from the Twitter live feed. Confirming this did indeed happen today. Kevin Michael TV at Cal MEKG 4H. BPD scanner, this is from the Boston Police scanner, has identified the names suspect 1, Mike Mulugeta, suspect 2, Sunil Tripathi, hashtag Boston, hashtag MIT. This was also confirmed by CBS Local. Boston Police on Friday revealed the names of 2 suspects in the Boston Marathon bombing, one of who is an Indian origin person, Sunil Tripathi, reported CBS-affiliated television station WFSB. So apparently what Pete Santilli did is he called the FBI. This is why he says this guy has some cojones. When confronted with this evidence, the FBI person who answered the phone said live on air to radio host Pete Santilli that these were unsubstantiated facts and appeared to get very upset at Santilli. Suspect number 1, Mike Mulugeta, alleged by some to be a dark-skinned male, was reported to have been shot dead by police. Photo released of Sunil was initially verified by Sunil's girlfriend. Interestingly, original suspect number 2, Sunil Tripathi, was reported missing and appeared on an official FBI list from March 16th, which coincidentally following a series of bomb explosions between Providence, Rhode Island and Boston, which took place on March 12th. Any relation between Sunil's disappearance and explosions are purely speculative thus far. At 11 p.m. on April 18th, an SUV was carjacked after an MIT campus policeman was shot, at which time Sunil Tripathi's Facebook page was immediately taken down. The U.S. military have intercepted or taken over communications over the Boston police scanners early today in what they are heard to refer to as Operation Tango 9/11. The U.S. military, the FBI, changed names to the Tsarnaev brothers. The FBI denying these original suspect names existed and instead are putting out the names of suspects are being of Chechen origin, named as a surviving bombing suspect identified as Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, 19, a former student from Cambridge Ringe and Latin High School in Cambridge, Mass. That is Matt Damon's old school, Ben Affleck as well. And his 26-year-old brother, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, both were at large. And one has been reported shot dead first this afternoon with the younger brother fleeing. Media reports have since revised reports to claim that older brother Tamerlan was actually run over by the younger brother in an SUV carjacking incident and has since died as a result of injuries sustained. So the final words here, as we speak, Boston police are chasing down the live suspects based on the shell game we've outlined above. Because of the inconsistencies surrounding the events in the last 72 hours, skeptics will rightly point out that the Tsarnaev brothers have most likely been set up to take the blame for what is clearly a professional and highly sophisticated bombing operation that took place on Monday in Boston. So there's more to this. Okay, so now we've got 2 layers. We've got the Tsarnaevs, and then we have Tripathi and Mulugeta. And what does that do? Well, that again reinforces Gemini. You have 2 pairs, and then you also have two potential lists of suspects. Mistaken identity. Gemini is rife with spycraft. That is one of the hallmarks of Gemini. Why? Because Gemini, if you look at, and I've talked about this before, when you look at Gemini, Gemini is Janus. It's happy face and sad face. It's duality. It's about being double agents, right? Or about having more than one identity. It's very Gemini. Gemini and Scorpio are they're the 2 big spy signs in astrology. So here we have, again, Gemini being acted out on two levels. Now, what's happening, so let's go back to last night, and then we're going to try to catch up with what's happening today. And then we're going to get into a little significance of April 19th. And then I may just take some calls to see what you guys think about all of this. Boston, by the way, is in complete lockdown. I mean, complete lockdown. The cell phones are being shut down. They're powering down certain areas. And this is all to try to find one 19-year-old boy who's probably scared shitless if he hasn't done anything. I saw them interview his uncle, who, by the way, lives in Maryland. I'm not suggesting anything there. It was funny, though, watching the uncle being interviewed. It was very direct, very matter of fact. And he said initially that the boys were losers. He hadn't seen them in like 5 years, by the way. However, he later goes on into the interview, as it's not even an interview, it's a press conference. He later says, anybody who would do this would be losers. He catches himself just a little bit. Just a little bit. He catches himself. So he kind of has a bit of a retraction. And then I guess about an hour later, I'm watching CNN, and there's our old pal, Wolf Blitzer. And Wolf Blitzer's calling them losers. Even though the guy kind of retracted and moved things around. No, not for Wolf Blitzer. He just blitzes right ahead. They're losers. So let's go back to last night. And I guess around, actually this morning, 3 in the morning. There are some things that I saw that were unusual. And when you're in the mix like that, there was nobody watching. People on the East Coast were asleep. People on the West Coast were seeing this. People here in Central or Mountain Time, I don't know. I was awake. So I'm watching this whole thing happen. And one of the things that they had, there were two images. One was actually wasn't an image, it was footage. I was watching it of a guy that was naked. They'd stripped this guy down naked, and they had him sitting in a squad car. I got a good look at his face for as much as you can at 4 in the morning with lights, random lights around him. I got a pretty good look at his face. He looked to me, if I had to use my forensics, he looked Asiatic, slightly Semitic. And he had a kind of a wide, stocky build. Not a lot of fat on him. This guy was definitely in shape. And they had the handcuffs behind him. He brazenly kind of walked right into the squad car, and he spent a half an hour inside the squad car. They talked to him. They wanted to letting this guy go, which I find interesting. And I'll tell you why I think it's interesting. Meanwhile, they had another guy face down on the ground. Now, some people are saying that was the naked guy. There are other people saying that was Tamerlan Tsarnaev on the ground. You can see him. He's got his hands out. He's got his feet crossed behind him. There's no blood. There is no blood at all. There is no trauma to the body. None. Now, if that is him and he's on the ground, I guess he could be run over by an unsuspecting car, couldn't he? Potentially. But it was interesting because they first said that he was killed during this melee that happened. There was the robbing of the 7-Eleven, because Lord knows if you're a terrorist, robbing a 7-Eleven is at the top of your list. I love it. I love it when on TV they try to find some thread or some level of consistency, right? So they're the talking heads on TV will have these guys who are terror experts. They usually have a British voice, And they sound quite sophisticated. They sound quite authoritative. So when a question is asked of them, why would a terrorist stay in the area, rob a 7-Eleven, and then hijack a car? Well, then the terror expert would reply, well, you see, when you're dealing with a terrorist, people think that you're dealing with somebody that's logical and has a rational and orderly psyche, and when in effect, really what you're dealing with is a sociopath or someone who has psychopathic tendencies, in which case they're capable of anything, including robbing a 7-Eleven. When we look at Eric Rudolph, who was arrested for the bombing in the Olympics in 1996, it was his strong belief against abortion which caused him to set up the bombs. So perhaps these young men did not like Nike. No, he didn't say that. But you know what I'm saying? So they have these guys that come on there, and then they're like, yeah, sure, of course. That makes total sense. These guys are going to stick around, and they're going to rob somebody, carjack, get caught. There's always somebody there to make it sound plausible. So what happened is that last night they've got this guy in the car, the squad car. He's naked, and you don't know who he is. And they've got the other guy on the ground. So then they say that the guy in the squad car was the guy who was driving the car who got carjacked, because they got carjacked. That guy got carjacked by the Tsarnaev brothers. And then they say that Tamerlan Tsarnaev, now they didn't say his name, but they called him Black Hat. That Black Hat had been killed. He'd been killed in the shootout. They later said that he was run over by his brother in the SUV. And that the naked guy was the guy who, I guess, originally drove the SUV. Now, here's where it gets all weird for me, if it hasn't already gotten weird. If you're the police, wouldn't you keep the naked guy and take the naked guy down to the station or wherever the body was of the older brother and have him ID the body? Wouldn't you do that? I mean, I'm not an expert in police procedure. And I'm afraid I don't watch enough CSI or any of the cop shows on TV. Although I did used to watch a lot of cop shows when I was a teenager. I was very into the cop shows. In fact, believe it or not, at one point in time in my life, I wanted to be a cop. And then unfortunately or fortunately, I discovered marijuana. Kind of changed my perspective a little, although I don't do that anymore. I stopped that many years ago. But anyway, that's a different story. So, but it seems to me that you would bring that guy downtown and you'd say, is this the guy? And then you would grill him. Are you sure? Are you sure that you're just the guy driving the car? Who are you really? Let's do a background check. Let's do this. I mean, come on now. This is a big deal. They are committing 9,000 troops. 9,000 troops. I'm not kidding you. Between the FBI and the police, 9,000 people are there, heavily armed, running around in LRADs. And if I were them, wouldn't you just commit a few guys to take that guy downtown and to make sure that you know everything about him? And if they didn't do that, then why did they let him go? Why did they let him go? And who is the guy on the ground? I think these are really important questions to ask. The naked guy. The naked guy is going to wind up being like one of the hobos that were arrested right after the JFK assassination. So we have a lot more to cover. There's a lot more to cover. There's this day, April 19th. On April 19th, we have the tragedy in Waco. It is an absolute tragedy. You know, it's really weird. It's like, you know, you have, you know, did David Koresh do some bizarre shit? Yes, he did. I'm not here to stand up for David Koresh. I'm not here to, put David Koresh on a pedestal. From what I know about David Koresh, he was kind of a megalomaniac, and he had set up, Mount Carmel as his, his harem with young women. I don't think he had sexual relations with young girls, although maybe 15, 16 with consent of the parents. Who knows? And I'm not advocating that, but when you get into that world, it's a whole different world. Just ask the Mormons. But anyway, so Koresh had his own trip going on, and one of the things that he did is he would snatch women. He would just basically, "You're my wife, you're with me now," and then he would split them apart from their male, so he'd take away the power of the male. He was like the rooster of the Branch Davidians in Mount Carmel. David Koresh is an interesting character. Vernon is his first name, Vernon. Anyway, he was an interesting character. He, I believe, is a Virgo, and I've talked about this story before. The Branch Davidians were actually, the headquarters of the Branch Davidians were in Australia. And when he was sort of drafted by this older couple to be the head of the Branch Davidians, he was this bumbling sort of guy who had no charisma. He had no leadership qualities. He goes to Australia. He spends time with the older couple who started their church, and he winds up apparently having a love affair with the older woman and gets into a gunfight with the older dude, and he kills the older dude. But because it was self-defense, he was able to leave Australia. This is, of course, before Australia took all its guns. He comes back to the United States, major transformation. He's a different person, keep that in mind. And he's able to quote scripture like nobody's business. He's charismatic. He's going to L.A. He used to do this thing. He was very into rock. He had a band. They had like a little band there. They had a stage. He'd play these rock concerts. And he would go to L.A., and this is back during the hair metal days. He'd go to L.A., and he would take two of his like hottest Branch Davidian women, and he would go to these clubs and, the whiskey or whatever. He'd see these bands, and he would like set up meetings with the band members. And he would try to recruit these guys who would play music to come out and live in Texas and be part of his rock and roll community. And of course, he'd have the hot women with him. He used to do this. So anyway, the one thing, was he a good guy? I don't know. He probably wasn't a good guy. But it didn't excuse what happened to those kids. And those kids were sacrificed. That was a ritual sacrifice that happened on the 19th of April in 1995. Then, of course, you have Oklahoma City happening on the same day. Timothy McVeigh, fertilizer bomb. So, okay, what are we doing now? We're connecting events. West Texas, near Waco, fertilizer plant, explosion, Tim McVeigh, fertilizer bomb, Oklahoma City, April 19th, April 19th, April 19th. Boom, 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 boom. All right there. Historically, that's what we're looking at. But there's more to April 19th as well. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to play some music. And on the backside of this music, I'm going to tell you some very interesting historical dates related to April 19th. Okay, so what do I want to play here? Don't want to play that. Don't want to play that. Don't want to play that. How about, I need some more. I always say that I need some more music, don't I? I never really put it up there. How about, I don't want to play anything too long. Is this A Town Called Pity? Let's just see. This might be A Town Called Pity by Gene Pitney. Let's find out. It's only 3 minutes and 16 seconds. I haven't played this in a while, but let's try this. Here we go. That was the late Ronnie Montrose performing A Town Called Pity, a song made popular many years prior to that by Gene Pitney, who died in a very unusual automobile accident in London. Not Ronnie Montrose. Ronnie Montrose committed suicide. So there we go. A Town Called Pity. That goes out to Boston, all the people of Boston, on so many levels. You know, I think in a lot of ways we've become callous and cynical because we've been conditioned now to look at these things with less of a reactive eye. Although, if you look at the symbolism of Watertown, what is Watertown? Water is emotion. And so this is supposed to evoke emotion via Watertown. And in some ways, it does evoke emotion. And for me, the emotion it evokes is my heart goes out to the people of Boston right here, right now, for being on a lockdown, for having their homes searched, for having, they're not even allowed to go outside right now. If you're in Boston, you're outside, they're going to be told to go back home. You're going to be met by somebody on the streets with a gun. So my heart goes out to Boston because you are dealing with fear. That is what you're dealing with right now. You're dealing with fear in a very, very big way. So, A Town Called Pity by Ronnie Montrose. Let's get into April 19th, and the dates of April 19th. You'll find some of them to be quite fascinating. We already talked about Waco and also Oklahoma City. Let's go way back in time. Way back in time. In the happening year of 65, the freedman Milicus betrayed Piso's plot to kill the Emperor Nero, and all the conspirators were arrested. So, right off the bat, in the year 65, conspiracy. The beginning of the Protestant Reformation takes place on April 19th. That's the second diet of spire bands of Lutheranism. The beginnings of the split away from the Catholic Church, April 19th, 1529. It's an important day. With no living male heirs, this is in 1713, Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, issues the Pragmatic Sanction of 1713 to ensure that Habsburg lands and the Austrian throne would be inherited by his daughter, Maria Theresa of Austria, not actually born until 1717. So this guy bucked tradition because it was normally the male who would inherit the land. He made sure, just in case, if he had a girl, that she would get it. So Maria Theresa of Austria, one of the first female leaders of the Western world. James Cook spotted Australia in his telescope, or his periscope, or whatever they used, the binocular. Spotted Australia. I'm sure that was a day in infamy for the Aboriginal people of Australia, 1770, April 19th. Too bad it wasn't foggy that day. Didn't see anything. Could have kept going. There would have been somebody else. Marie Antoinette married Louis XVI. Here's where it gets really interesting. In 1775, the American Revolutionary War, the war begins with an American victory in Concord during the battles of Lexington and Concord. So there we go. The first throwdown with the British is on April 19th, 1776. It will also prove to be a very pivotal day. Sorry, 1775, not 1776, 1775. And it also proved to be a very pivotal day with the Civil War, because the Baltimore riot of 1861, a pro-secession mob in Baltimore attacked the United States Army marching through the city. So you had the Battle of Baltimore, the Baltimore riot, this day on the 19th of April, a pro-secession mob in Baltimore, Maryland. Threw down. It's very important. It's a big day. It's a big deal. Let's see. What else do we have? Something pretty interesting here. Let's have to find it. Let's see. Today, 1971, was the day that Charles Manson was sentenced to death for conspiracy to commit the Tate LaBianca murders. Think about that for the energy of this day. India launched its first satellite. That really has nothing to do with our topic, though, does it? The Simpsons premiered on April 19th as a short cartoon on the Tracy Ullman Show. Think about that. Here's another interesting piece. In 1993, on the same day as the Branch Davidian tragedy occurred, just outside of Waco, where 81 people died, South Dakota Governor George Mickelson and 7 others were killed when a state-owned aircraft crashed in Iowa. Think about that. In 1995, of course, Oklahoma City bombing in McVeigh. In 2005, just doesn't seem like it was that long ago when I tell you this. In 2005, Joseph Ratzinger was elected to the 265th as the 265th Pope of the Catholic Church. Think about that. 2005, that was 8 years ago. That's when Benedict was elected. Today. 8 years ago. In 1999, it's going back a few years, the German Bundestag returned to Berlin. And this was the first German parliamentary body to meet there since the Reichstag was dissolved in 1945. Very interesting time, interesting event. And there's some interesting deaths on this day as well. Levon Helm, the great drummer and singer from the band, he passed away just last year. Leopold David de Rothschild, he died last year as well. The rapper, producer, guru from Gang Starr, he passed away in 2010 on this day. And J.G. Ballard, the novelist, also passed away a year prior to that in 2009. But as you can see, there's plenty of action happening with the energy of the day itself. We are still in what they call the Satanic High Holy Days, which takes place roughly from the 15th of April all the way through the 1st of May. So there's a reason why a lot of these things happen during this time. And April 31st, May 1st is Walpurgisnacht, and it's kind of a nasty time. Kind of a nasty time out there. So where does this leave us all? Where is this all going? Well, CISPA passed, which, by the way, passed while everybody was looking at Boston. And also, Congress could resume their insider trading. If you don't know about that, if you aren't aware of it, members of Congress and I believe the Senate can get tips from anybody on Wall Street as to when to buy and sell stock. It's true. They banned it for a while, but now it's back. Now, and this just happened a few days ago, now you can actually get a call from somebody at, say, Merrill Lynch, and they'll say, hey, if I were you, I might want to sell Netflix. Okay. Thanks, and I'll remember you next year. Hey, you're welcome. So they got that right back. Insider trading, CISPA passed. CISPA is the internet bill that gives the federal government broad powers. I mean broad powers to get into your database. They can take websites down. This is going to be a very challenging time for privacy, and even if you are remotely critical, you run the risk of having your website shut down or cordoned off or hazmated or however you want to phrase it. So people that do things like me and other people online, this is a very tricky time, And now when you put that together with the NDAA and CISPA and what's happening in Boston and the shutdown and the city lockdown, you put all these things together, you begin to see the interlocking pieces of a puzzle. That's all coming together. That just happened in CISPA 2 days ago. And of course, the gun bill failed. And that's all people can talk about is the gun bill failing, but of course CISPA goes through. they'll have another crack at this gun bill. Trust me, it'll come back around, and it'll be more aggressive this time, and they'll get it through. They'll get it through because of what's happening right now in Boston. So the future, boys and girls, does not look bright. I'm going to be straight up with you. Does not look bright. Everything is assembling itself to look as though more security, more control, more lockdown, all taking place. Backpacks will never be backpacks again. Just like moving trucks were never moving trucks again after Oklahoma City. I mean, I am not a suspicious person. I don't look around to see if somebody's doing something. But after seeing what's happened here, I, just as being close to it via the media, it's affected me. I look around now, I'm wondering, geez, how are people viewing me? Or, hey, maybe I should be looking for things, not because I'm trying to, not because I'm trying to root out a terrorist, just because I want to stay safe. You know what I mean? So this is how it's affected me. And I think it's how it's affected probably other people as well. And who knows how it's affecting these people in Boston, because that's a major, major mind job, if you know what I mean. That's what it is, total mind job. And this is where we're headed. And part of the reason why we're headed this way is because there's such huge amounts of money in security. If you're into security, if you have a security company and you see this, you're just salivating. You're thinking, we can have scanners at every single mall. Think about that. Every single mall across America, scanners. You walk through, you get scanned, you get detected. Every single mall. And it could be not just the entrances of the mall, but also in the individual businesses inside the malls themselves. That's pretty significant. Sporting events, same deal. Same deal. And this is, I think, the vision of America that we have to look forward to. Now, the only thing that I think that will begin to slow this down and maybe even derail it is if there's some infighting between the two factions that appear to be kind of going at it from time to time. And if there's infighting, there can be delay, and there could also be some monkey wrenches. But if events continue and unfold the way they do, which it's going to get a lot more oppressive, and people are going to ask for it. They're going to ask for their handcuffs. They're going to ask for their oppression. They're going to say, please, please give it to me. And they'll feel so much safer because somebody else has checked somebody else. And it's unfortunate. It's really, really, really unfortunate. And, people on Facebook were telling me, you got it right, you got it right, you got it right. I don't want to be right. I don't want to be right. Not like that. Not like that. So I think in the meantime, we have to keep our morale up. And, when you don't sleep for 2 hours, it's kind of hard. Or when you only sleep for 2 hours, it's kind of hard. But I think we need to keep our morale up. And I know that this is counterintuitive, but I am going to share this with you. I believe that it may be in our best interest for a while to not post as much as we have been. And I'm just putting that out there. One of the things that I saw today was they were using Dzhokhar's Twitter feed as kind of evidence against him, that what he was saying was somehow corroborating his imbalanced and extreme mental state. So I think that we may want to rethink at times what we're posting, how we're posting, when we're posting. And I even have to rethink it for my blog, to be honest with you. We need to. It's going to be. This is the rules are changing. Now, as far as the radio goes, I'm still going to do my blog, and I'm still going to continue to do radio. And in fact, I'm more determined than ever to get my pipeline and all the other things that I need to have my own experience. And that's actually being worked on right now. I'm putting the wheels in motion on that. Because that's what I want to do. And, it's my service to the world. And I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to open up the phone lines. And if you want to call in, you want to get something off your chest, if there's something about this event that you don't feel comfortable with, or you have some insight that I haven't sort of uncovered, because trust me, there's a lot more out there. Call in. Here's the number, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. This is an open space, an open forum for you to vent, to release, to connect dots, whatever you want to do. This is what this is for. So I urge you to call in and do exactly that. Tomorrow is 420, which is interesting. I'll never forget one time. This is about, I don't know, I think it was probably about 3 years ago, and I was living in Richmond, Point Richmond, and it was 420 day. I might have even talked about this on the show, because I was doing the show then, and I'm hearing that this music is like hard, this heavy rap music and this heavy funk stuff. But man, where's that music coming from? And I looked out my back window, and my place sat above the place behind me, so I could look down into the place behind me. There was a fence separating us. It was 2 stories, the place behind me. Top story was a residence. Bottom story was, it was kind of a storefront. Turns out that it was 420, and there was and I didn't know this at the time, but there was a cannabis dispensary that had opened right up behind my house. Right in my backyard, backed up right to my house. I'm like, what? And I found out because I walked around the block, and I knocked on the door of this place, and there's a security guard out there and everything. And I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And she said, well, this is a dispensary. This woman comes up. She said, this is a dispensary. And I have to admit, she was fairly attractive. She said, this is a dispensary. I said, oh, really? When did this happen? Oh, we've been open now for 3 weeks. This is our official opening. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you're playing that music really loud. So I said, okay, well, I just kind of looked at her. Then she looked at me, she says, do you need anything? Do you want anything? No, I don't really need anything. Turns out she had been a stripper, and she had taken all of her stripping money and decided to throw down and get a dispensary, thinking, hey, I could just sell pot legally. She lasted about a month and a half. There was another dispensary in town. We had 2 dispensaries in my little tiny town, separated by about a block between the 2 of them. And they both got shut down by the city of Richmond for whatever reason. So that happened on 420. So tomorrow's 420. And hopefully we can get through this. I haven't looked at the news. I don't know what's going on. Should we just do a quick peek here at the news? Because this is a situation that's moving. Let me just go to Yahoo very quickly and see what's happening. Let's go there right now. Okay. Says Boston on lockdown as manhunt intensifies. Where the images here are just intense, man. And these guys are driving around in LRADs. If you don't know what an LRAD is, it is a vehicle that has the ability to produce a high frequency spectrum that will either affect your hearing, or it will affect your body heat and fry you. So they're driving around with LRADs. They're busting out all the big DHS equipment. Okay, so if nobody's going to call in, I'm probably not going to talk too much more about the event because I've said all that I need to say. So this is your opportunity to call. I'll give the number one more time. 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If you want to chime in, if you want to give your insights, or any incongruities that you're seeing here, you can do that. And if not, well, then I'm going to shut it down today and try to live my life as peaceably as I can as an astrologer, helping others with their lives. Just in case you don't know, it looks like I'm going to be doing 2 episodes at Gaiam TV, produced and directed by Jay Widener, so we'll cross your fingers on that one. And I'm trying to really expand the horizons here, and the Kickstarter is definitely going to be one of them. On Monday, let's do a little bit of housekeeping here. On Monday, I'm going to have Darren Williams on the show. Actually, he won't be on the show. I already talked to him yesterday. But because the situation was so hot and engrossing, I decided to just run with the Boston Marathon instead of playing my interview with Darren. And the interview with Darren is great. He talks about Margaret Thatcher, who's being, I believe, buried this weekend. The public is paying for it. And a lot of the public are pissed off because England's wealth was a lot. There was less wealth for the majority by the time Thatcher was done with the English economy. She passed something called the poll tax, and the poll tax was essentially her version of Reaganomics and supply side economics and trickle down theory. I get into that with Darren, and we'll talk about that on Monday. It's already done. It's in the can. It's a really good interview. If you go onto my page on Facebook, Darren has a post on General Jimmy, which is where he writes, and you can read that post. And that's all about the Margaret Thatcher era, who she was and where she came from. By the way, for all you astrology fans out there, Margaret Thatcher was going through her 3rd Saturn return. She was 88 years old, and Saturn in her chart was right on the ascendant in Scorpio. So when she passed away, Saturn was just 2 degrees off of her natal Saturn. Her natal Saturn, 13 degrees Scorpio. And then her Saturn, where she was when she passed, was 11 degrees Scorpio. She's the same age as the Queen, who's going through her 3rd Saturn return as well. But you find out more about that on Monday when I talk with Darren. All right, so if you're not going to call in, I'm going to shut this puppy down for the day and try and get some work done and maybe try and get a little sleep since I got none last night. So cross your fingers, say some prayers for the people of Boston. They need it. Say some prayers for this country. We need it. Say some prayers for the world. The world needs it. Invoke whatever deity you can in order to help us get through the dark days ahead, because there are going to be dark days ahead. Trust me. Stay strong. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to Friday Farcast. I'll be back on Monday with Darren Williams in the life and times of Margaret Thatcher. Don't miss it. Adios.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words, I submit that these impressions are valid and significant. And I will even say this, such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.